Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Wally Bear and the No Gang, brought to us by American Video Entertainment. An unlicensed game for the NES, like many ones that were produced by other companies such as Tengen and Color Dreams, Wally Bear and the No Gang is an educational game that's meant to teach kids not to do drugs. And anyone who's actually played this game would probably rather be on drugs than continue playing this game. Produced in 1992, is actually made in part with the American Medical Association and the National Clearinghouse for Alcohol and Drug Information. The game features Wally Bear and his friends as he's trying to go from level to level to get to his uncle's house for a party. You start off in the nice suburbs, and in the end of the game you end up in the ghetto and pretty much a crack house. You would think the game would go the opposite direction, but that's just the way they decided to take. Anyway, here we go with Wally Bear and the No Gang for the NES. The game can be played 1 or 2 players. The 2-player mode has you alternating every time one of the other characters dies. The thing about it is you both play as Wally Bear and there's no difference between the sprites for either character. Just like most hip things from the 90s, they had to give Wally a backwards hat, a skateboard, and a pair of sunglasses. They also gave him the ability to instantly be killed by bulldogs and flying doves. Now you can gain some extra hits by picking up power-ups. There's 2 power-ups in the game, and I recommend having them all at all times. You can pick up 2 skateboards, each skateboard making you go slightly faster, and 2 frisbees, one allowing you to throw 1 frisbee at a time, while the other lets you throw 2 frisbees at a time. The frisbees are your only weapon and the only way you can actually defeat enemies. Anytime you take a hit while having all 4 of the upgrades, you lose a random one. Like sometimes when you get hit you may lose a skateboard upgrade, or other times when you get hit you may lose a frisbee. The game is rather linear, with no actual alternate paths for you to take, so it's just from getting from left to right in each of the stages. And the game may look kind of easy, but actually it ends up being pretty challenging. There's some really tough platforming later on in the game in the last few levels, as well as the path of the birds and later the bats are completely random where they're going to spawn and what directions they're going to go. The second level of the game is a subway train, and this ends up being one of the 2 easiest levels, the other one being another subway, with the only difference I think being 1 or 2 extra rats located in the subway itself. As long as you picked up one of the frisbee upgrades, you should have no problem just running straight forward to the right and throwing a frisbee every so often, usually at the beginning of each section of the train, in order to hit the rat that's upcoming. Once in a while the rat may jump and jump over your frisbee, but you can also then just jump over him easily. At the end you can pick up another frisbee, so you should have 2 frisbees now, and 2 of the skateboard upgrades. Probably my favorite line of dialogue is the advice Wally gives to Toby, and that is, taking drugs is stupid. And who didn't say the writers of this game weren't Shakespearean? The third level has you outside the train station, now going through another suburb. They introduce a new enemy here, the giant standing dog. I think that's what at least it's supposed to be. But anyway, he dies just like the dogs and birds with 1 frisbee. And since he's a bigger target, you can hit him whether you're standing up or ducking down. There are some extra power-ups that you can gain by jumping on the rooftops of some of the houses. Most of them contain nothing, but if you're desperate you can look on top of them. However, there's only a handful of upgrades per level, and a lot of the times if I find myself getting hit, it's best just to reset the game and try to get the power-ups all over again. In the next subway level, we're trying to get a stolen radio back for this poodle. And the thing is, the subway ends up being just as easy as it was the first time around. Pretty much you can just stay on the ground if you like, firing a frisbee every so often, and you should be able to fire 2 at this point, and just easily take out the rat enemies that may be in front of you. At the end of the level, you somehow got the radio back, even though we never actually saw Wally pick it up at any point during the stage. In the next level, you can see we're now in an urban area. It's not broken down or anything, but you can see the area isn't as safe as maybe the first few areas of the game. Also now, the birds have gone from being like white doves to being blackbirds or crows. The only real threat in this level is there are some rats that will pop out of the windows of the buildings and drop bombs on you. Now, of course, the bombs will just hurt you like any of the other normal enemies, and you can get hurt by just running into them. Now, next up is easily the easiest level, or part of a level, in the entire game. You're in a giant parking garage, and there's only one door you can go through in order to complete the level. Head all the way straight over to the right, and drop down 3 times, and enter the door on the right. There, you've completed the easiest level of Wally Bear and the No Gang by far. However, this is where it starts to get tough, as begins the first of the 2 sewer levels of the game. There's tons of dripping slime from the ceilings, there's now bats instead of birds which move at the same pace, as well as some big gaps for you to jump over. One thing I must mention about the birds and bats, a good way to avoid them is actually by ducking. For some reason, they can't hurt you if you duck. However, other enemies can hurt you when you're ducking. The next room is actually really tough, that you have all these heads on top spitting at you. The thing about it is, they can spit again immediately after their projectile disappears. So the best way to avoid them is dodge it and let it go off screen. While it's still going off screen, you should have enough time to jump up to the next platform. Skip the first door and then go into the second door to complete the stage and enter the second sewer level. This is the hardest level in the game, and we only have one more level actually after this. At the beginning, I recommend taking out the enemies on the platforms like the snakes before jumping to the small ones, because usually you'll just end up getting hit by that snake on the platform since it's such a small gap. Thankfully, the creators of this game do give you a few upgrades during this stage, because at this point you're probably going to get hit at least once or twice during this level. As long as you have an upgraded skateboard, these jumps end up being pretty easy because you can jump a really long distance. However, if you lose your speed upgrades, you're going to have to take your time a lot slower because your jumping is not nearly as good. In the next segment, you can drop down and pick up a skateboard, and then climb up the windows all the way to the very top. You can grab yourself an extra frisbee, then walk over 5 of these pillars, and then drop down on the 5th one and enter the first door. Now it's time for the final level of Wally Bear and the No Gang. And here we meet Wally's friend Stevie. Now Stevie almost got lured into a van by some man who was offering some candy. Unfortunately, Stevie decided not to go in the van because that would have been a much more satisfying ending to this game, Wally finding his friend Stevie beaten up, destroyed, raped, and killed in the woods. And with that pleasant picture now in your head, we move on to the final level. And as you can see, we're in a relatively decrepit city at this point. You can see the buildings are a lot more beat up, and a lot of the brick walls that are in the background are definitely falling apart. And there also seems to be an abundance of guys throwing bombs out of the windows. Since there's really no platforming during this level, it ends up being extremely easy for a final stage. After this parking garage is the last few buildings, and just look at them. Including the one you enter, with a ton of broken windows. I mean, this is really where we wanted to have a party for anti-drugs? Anyway, here's the ending to Wally Bear and the No Gang. And in the end, Wally and all his friends tell us if you know it's wrong, just say no. We get to see all of Wally's friends in the same exact sprites in the background, as well as a great picture of Wally giving a thumbs up. It then goes back to the title screen so you can begin the game all over again. I must admit though that this game is actually a lot tougher than I probably made it look, but then again I'm the guy who's also trying to set the world record in this game. But anyway, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and please, say yes to all my future Play It Throughs. I hope you enjoyed.